Hello, welcome. I recently released a demo for the Majestic. If you've given it a try, thank you. Your feedback is invaluable. What I have found has been overwhelmingly positive has been the flying system, the visuals, and to some extent the story. And what seems to need a little bit of work is the gameplay and the story delivery. And I'm not surprised by this at all. I believe I have a handle on what needs work, and I'm going to focus on those weak points and make a much better game because of it. So to address some of this, I want to start off with the story delivery. I believe the biggest issue is the amount of story that's thrown at the player at any given time. There's giant monolithic blocks of text just scrolling past as the player is trying to figure out the game, and it can be a little bit fatiguing. So when you first enter the game, there's a intro cinematic, and you got to watch that and listen to that, and then after the cinematic is over, there's this narrator that comes on, and it kind of summarizes what you just watched in hopes of clarifying some of the events and giving a little more context. It's a lot to absorb right away, and I understand it's a bit much. So in my opinion, the biggest experiment here is the narrator. She came about toward the end of developing this portion of the demo, and the reason she came about is because in my first game, The Companion, one of the largest critiques for the game has been the confusing story. Reasons for that story being confusing, I believe, could be my poor writing, or there was lack of context at any single point in the game, and the player couldn't revisit and get that added context around story beats. And then thirdly, which I think is the most important, is the fact that that game and this game are both told non-linearly, which I, in fact, like. I think it's one of the unique selling points for my game. It's like putting together a little puzzle as you're playing the game to unveil the full story by the end of it. That's a type of story I personally enjoy watching and telling. So the non-linear storytelling is definitely a little bit of a problem, because players, I believe, when they start the game, they're taken a bit off guard by it, and they're not ready to piece it together and absorb everything that's thrown at them. And by the time they figure it out, it's a little bit too late, and they've missed a chunk of it, and now they're just confused and lacking all the context from the beginning of the game. So one of my attempts to solve this was to have this narrator summarize a bit of what was happening, give some added context, and place all that text in a journal that you could reference later on. I think in some ways she's been a success, and in other ways she's hindered the game. So I do have a few ideas to fix this, and the first one is to make the blocks of text much more condensed and shorter, so the narrator's not going on and on and on for several minutes. Secondly, maybe she could be, you could skip through it. I could also add a way to toggle the narrator entirely so that she only, you can disable her maybe as a settings option, and the text will still show up in the journal, and you can read about it if you want to, but make it a completely optional feature. And then, of course, the nuclear option is just getting rid of her entirely. That I'm not opposed to doing that. Again, the narrator is basically a large experiment and does absorb a lot of development time in terms of writing, voice acting, implementation, and all that. A lot of that work's done now, so to add more of it will not be as much work, but if it helps the game, then I'm still not opposed to just getting rid of the narrator entirely. Of course, your thoughts on this will help a lot in my decisions going forward. Narrator aside, the other story delivery element I believe needs a little bit of work are the major story beats, which are delivered through cinematics. These cinematics can range from a minute to several minutes long, and right now you can't skip through them, you can't move your character, you're pretty much locked into watching them and listening to them. For the most part, this is a story game, and these are the major beats of the story, so I don't want them to necessarily be skippable. However, I do think there's room to improve in a couple ways. One of these solutions is to allow the player to switch from the cinematic camera back to the player character and to be able to move around and fly around and get their own perspective and view of what's going on. And then, of course, another thing I want to strive to do is shorten them up a bit. For me, this is a bit hard to do. I have a tendency to make things go long. I just want to create a nice cinematic, but I know for games, shortening them up will be beneficial, and then there'll just probably be a few special cases where they go a little longer. Outside of that, I do want to find other ways to deliver story in smaller chunks throughout the game, just little bits and pieces here and there, such as through hidden objectives or optional tasks and optional events. And I have implemented some of this already in the demo as a little an experiment to see how they perform. So there's a few different tasks that come online after after watching some of the major story beats. So that's always in the back of my mind to try to implement these side quests that could be beneficial and add a little more context to what's going on in the world. Based on your feedback, I think one of the major development tasks going forward is making the gameplay more fun and engaging and requiring more actions from the player. And I do have a couple ideas. This is a dangerous topic as it borders on feature creep, which is the death knell of most indie games. Any new features will take weeks to months of development time away from other aspects of the game, which could be improved and enhanced and made even better than they are now. So my plan is to implement just a couple more things that could lead to a little more player decision making, and hopefully that will turn out for the better. We'll see. The good news is the demo, one of the major reasons it's released now is it offers a solid foundation for which to build the rest of the game. So I can do a little more experiments, build upon this foundation, and I feel it's in a good spot. It's a lengthy demo, much more lengthy than most. I tried to throw all of my ideas that were currently in development into it, and there's some of these ideas they might get cut, and then there's a few areas they need to be enhanced upon, and there's a lot of things that are going to change. And this demo, it represents the feeling and the style of the game I'm trying to make, but of course there's tons of room for improvement. So far from the demo, I've received a few surprises. I've been quite surprised at the positivity towards the flying mechanic, which is a huge relief for me. It's clearly not finished. There will be improvements to it, but I'm happy most people seem to enjoy where it's at right now. The other surprise so far is I haven't heard much about the performance, which is another huge relief, as it's something I spent a tremendous amount of time on leading up to the release of this demo. I did not want to put this out there until it was performing well on a lot of machines. So there's a ton more improvement to make with the performance, of course, but the fact it's playing well right now is definitely a huge relief. So one issue happens to be that the game does crash for some older graphics cards, and I do hopefully at some point intend to solve this crash. The reason for this is there's these shaders that need to be compiled based on your system specifications. If this isn't done in advance, then you're going to receive a lot of hitchy gameplay while playing, which is just not fun. A lot of my play testers early on were experiencing a lot of hitching. So to solve for this, right now there's a hack in place where your system is forced to precompile all of the shaders at the loading screen. And this happens one time, and then when you load the game subsequent times, it's already been done and you do not need to do it anymore. So even if you're not crashing at this screen, that initial compile shader screen could take a lengthy amount of time for some systems. But once you've done it one time, you're good to go, and you'll be able to play the game as smoothly as possible. This is why you hear a lot of games out there. There's a lot of hitchiness problems because some of these games might not do this. They don't have a system in place to precompile the shaders. And that's one of the major complaints with Unreal Engine games in particular, is this hitchy gameplay. Now, there's other more advanced solutions I can enlist, but these only make sense closer to when the game is closer to finished, as it requires a lot more resources in terms of other people helping to pre-compile shaders and sending me the batches of them so that I can bundle them up and put them in the build of the game. This way it's all pre-compiled for the end user. Until the game is closer to finished, then right now this hack is in place that just forces your system to pre-compile them that first time you load the game. This is also the reason why when you play it on consoles, it's usually ultra smooth and no hitchy gameplay, is because a console, the hardware is locked and the developers can pre-compile the shaders for the console. So that's the reason there's some headache with getting into the game right now. Either if you have an older card, you might be crashing and you just can't get in at all. And even if you have newer specs, you might be sitting at that loading screen for a lengthy amount of time, unfortunately. Hopefully it's not too much of an inconvenience. So the last part of this devlog I wanted to touch on is the confusing part that having the game start in Act 2, at least the demo. So when I was planning out the development for this game, I first looked at the story, what seemed to be the most challenging bits of it, and then I wanted to kind of solve the major challenges immediately. And I identified Act 2 as one of the acts that had a lot of challenges. So I've spent the last 2 years solving all of the technological challenges that this game has offered, working on the performance, the controls, the settings, and now I have this solid foundation of Act 2, which I can now create the more important parts of the game, which are the other acts. So I intend this game to be a 5-act game. Like, there's 5 story beats, 5 major acts of the game, each one its own level. Each of these levels, so far Act 2 takes approximately 2.5, maybe 3 hours to complete. The demo, in fact, you can't 100% the demo. It only, the maximum you can get to is like 83% if you're looking at the login screen. So, that's, a 12 to 15 hour game right now. Now I'm working on Act 1, the intro to the entire game. And with all of this I've done for Act 2, I hope the intro will be the absolute best it can possibly be. And I do think the intro, the beginning of a game, should be super good and it's super important. It's, the players are first introduced to everything. It needs to feel fun right away. There needs to be a reason to keep going into the game. My kids, they'll start a game and after, 10 minutes, they've moved on to the next thing. So that's a lot of the reason I started with Act 2 was to solve the major challenges and also to create that foundation where I can now make the other parts even better and learn from my mistakes. Act 2 does give me, a place where I could screw up a little bit. It's probably going to be one of the least memorable parts of the game, at least hopefully, because I want obviously the beginning to be memorable, as the majority of players will experience that. And then, the climax of the game, which should happen, Acts 3 or 4, somewhere in there, should be a major point of the story and memorable. And then anybody who finishes the game, Act 5, that should be a satisfying conclusion. So it needs to be pretty well done as well. And, Act 2, it's I want it to be good, and maybe there will be some memorable parts to it. But in terms, comparing it to the rest of the game and what's planned, I do hope the other parts will be even better. So all that said, there's going to be some major changes to Act 2 to make it better. For example, the whole intro, tutorial, new player experience, whatever you want to call it, that's going to get ripped out of Act 2 and put in Act 1. I'm actually building this entire intro or tutorial right now, and I'm learning from the demo what's working and what needs improvement, and I'm going to try to make this even better. It can't just be watch a bunch of cinematics and fly from place to place. So I do have some ideas to implement a couple more engaging features, and this kind of goes back to the gameplay section where I want to add a couple different additional features into the game that require more engagement from the player. There's some abilities in Act 2 right now that do not belong there. You will receive them in Act 1, such as the dart or super speed or zoomies ability, whatever you want to call it, the thing that makes you fly faster. That's going to be acquired sooner. So this might be something that's acquired more immediately, at least the first iteration. If you've played more of the demo, you'll know there's a couple levels of this speed ability. There also might just be some things that get cut entirely from Act 2, as it is a little populated with things, a bunch of similar types of things right now. So if I can remove some of those and add a varying degree of other things, that could help with the diversity of the level in particular. So yeah, right now there's a bit going on in one aspect. Act 2, this demo there was so much involved with getting it to this point in terms of the technology side, the story and everything, the performance, getting all of the unfun bits of game development out of the way, such as the settings, which probably was a couple months of work, and then the controller support. I feel like I haven't been creating content for this game for 6 months or more now. So now that this demo is released and all of these things are in place, I'm at a point where I can really create the content and a couple more features. I feel this is a very solid foundation to build upon and make a really great game. So hopefully that clears that up a bit. Right now, I'm just working on Act 1, and hopefully I'll have a lot more to show in the coming months. That said, I think that's going to wrap it up here. I'll see you next time. Take care.